Well, good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order, the November 11th, 2019 special meeting work session for the York County School Board. But I'd also like to express my appreciation, or our appreciation as a board, to our military veterans who we recognize and honor on Veterans Day today. And this day is set aside to reflect and appreciate the many sacrifices and remember those veterans who have served our country in the past, and to thank those who are presently serving. But not just today, but for every day, we're thankful for their service. So thank you. And I'd do appreciate all those that came out and showed their support by voting on November 5th. However, it's a little bittersweet time because as I respect the decisions of Ms. Haywood, Dr. George, and Mr. Medford to spend less time in board meetings and hearings and planning sessions and more time pursuing some of their own other interests, it is a little bittersweet. But with that being said, I'm looking forward to working with our new board members, and they're all three of our newest ones are here tonight that will be inducted in January. And that's Mark Schaefer from District 1. And Mr. Brett Higginbotham will be coming back and serving, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with you, Brett. And Laurel Geraltz from District 3 is here. And Mr. Sean Myatt from District 5. And I'll be returning as well, and I'd like to thank everyone for their support for me during the election, so thank you. So moving forward, we have a full agenda this evening, and first one is a policy update, but before that, I think we have a minor adjustment to our agenda tonight. Is that correct, Dr. Shandor?
It is. Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Good evening, board members. We need to do an update on transportation this evening, and I'd like to recommend that we add our transportation update to item D, right after cell phone tower. That's all right.
Is the board in agreement with that? Okay. All right, thank you. All right, go ahead, Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Our first informational item this evening, Dr. Tony Vladu from Chief Human Resource Officer will share information related to digital communication policy. Dr. Vladu.
Good evening, Mr. Richardson, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. Tonight I have one update. As you'll remember, last May you approved the funding to implement a division-wide texting platform. This program will provide teachers and staff with an easy-to-use application to communicate with families and students while still having the ability to retain records. To support the implementation of this program, we're currently developing a digital communication policy. So I want to share with you that we plan to bring this before you for discussion at the November board meeting.
All right. Thank you. Any questions on that? Good. All right, so moving right ahead. Thank you, Dr. Vladu, for sharing that update. And we're going to move on to the calendar update for our next topic, Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. I have just a brief update this evening related to the calendar. We're still in the process of reviewing all the responses from the survey that was administered in September. I've met recently with the regional superintendents, and we all agreed that more time is needed to thoroughly review the feedback that was provided in all of our systems. Therefore, in order to allow our families and staff to begin planning for next school year, we will develop a calendar for 2021 that begins the day after Labor Day, like we typically have done in the past. However, the Regional Calendar Committee will develop proposals for the 21-22 school year that will include options for a pre-Labor Day start using the feedback from the surveys. So
Sounds good.
Any questions or concerns?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shandor, for that update. And now we're moving on to cell towers as our next agenda item, Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. I'm going to turn this one over to Dr. Carroll, Chief Operations Officer.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. Mr. Richardson, members of the board, as Dr. James has done in the past in similar situations, I'm here to inform you that we've been approached for placing a cell phone tower in the vicinity of Queens Lake. Verizon approached us about putting something there. The county has adjacent land to Queens Lake, and we have a land there. And so they were looking at where would be the best place. Staff from both agencies determined that the best location was to actually place it on our property. And the good thing about that is that the income that comes from that tower would then come to us. And so we've talked about compensation, which would be in line with current industry standards. Now, in order to do so, we would have to have a 55-50 piece of land that we would lease to them. There'd be a service road which would have to be constructed up to county code and would come at the vendor's expense. And we've agreed to a route on that. I've included on board docs 2 maps for you. One is a simple schematic and the other one is a Google Earth image. This delineates where the intended location would be, as well as that service road. The proposed monopole tower would be located approximately 375 feet from the closest home and within approximately 105 feet from the closest school building. The tower is also designed in a fashion where if there was to be a failure in structure, that it would collapse within the lease area, that 50 by 50 foot area. Absent any objection from the board, we intend to allow the vendor to present their plans to the county to go through the planning process before coming back to you for final approval. And that would come at a regular board meeting under the consent agenda. The vendor would like to move quickly, so I imagine this would happen in the next 2 to 3 months.
So then you're looking at sometime, will this come back on the agenda in December or January for
Somewhere-
discussion? Or next time we see it, it'll be for approval?
Well, we were going to put it on the consent agenda. We could bring it either way. I mean, if you'd like to pull it for discussion, certainly.
At what point does the community have the opportunity to understand this and will the county, other than their county board meeting, there's no other opportunity?
Right,
Or-
right. So the county has their processes, and those would be advertised, and they can.
And that would be
have
first
input
before
there.
us?
Exactly, yes.
Has this been in the newspaper anywhere?
No, this is
This is the first time? Well, I guess the question is, how do you get it publicized in the Upper County
the
before it
county does
happens?
So the county starts that process. And then
Okay.
we of course can go through that process on our end also.
Okay.
And I know the county has several sites on their property already that they do this. Do we have any other sites on school property that we do?
We do. Forgive me if I can't remember all of them, but we have one on York High, one at Bruton. Mr. Dolak, why don't you help?
Magruder.
Magruder, right.
In Bruton High School.
Right.
You said Bruton.
I said Bruton.
Any other questions?
No. Thank you, Dr. Carroll, for that presentation. Thank you. And strategic plan update, goal 1 of gifted education.
We're gonna
Do the
do
transportation.
Oh, transportation first, then go back to
Yeah,
that.
sorry. So we're
That's
gonna go right back to Dr. Carroll for the transportation update.
Okay. So as you know, we've been facing some adversity with transportation actually for quite some time. I think as long as I've been with the division. I remember us talking about filling bus routes as far back as 5 years ago, and I think that predates me. I want to give you the context of what we're dealing with here. So in those last 5 years that I've been in HR, one of the problems that we've had in schools has been having the ability to fill all of the absences that we have with teachers. And we've been able to fill them anywhere from, the low that I saw was 85%, but I think it was a little lower before that, and we got them up to 90% last year. That was with employing about 350 substitute teachers and paras against our 900 school teachers, so about 1 sub for every 3 employees in that realm. So now let's look at what's happening with bus drivers and assistants. The good news is we have a driver assigned to every route that we have, and that's roughly 120. The bad news is we have 0 additional substitutes. So the context would be if you wanted the type of fill rate that we're getting with teachers, you'd have to have about 40 substitute bus drivers. And we are continuously looking for those, but in this economy, it's a tough thing because anybody who wants a job has a job. And certainly when the economy is not doing as well, we tend to have more people apply for these positions. So we've been working on this problem for a while, so I'd like to highlight some of the things that we've done. And before I do that, just one more thing on the context, is that this is happening while we have an expanded student population. We've gone up in students this year. We've also had more demand from special education and McKinney-Vento transportation. So every time we have more of those things, it puts additional pressure. So if we go back 2 years ago, we started working on what could we do on the supply side? What could we do to improve the number of drivers we have and to retain the ones we already have? We started having focus groups with those drivers to find out what was going on with their working conditions. And we started a driver advisory committee to try to address those things. In FY19, we created an entirely different pay structure that evened out the steps, raised the starting pay, and we revamped the attendance bonus. Everybody got a raise that year. We increased the driver referral bonus. We started a non-licensed job fair in the Upper County for that purpose, and we started the design of a non-licensed working conditions survey. And we continued the driver advisory committee. And then for this year, when we went to adjusting for compensation this year, we did not grant any steps. We just gave a market adjustment, which meant the whole, tide just came up 3%. And we did that, we made that choice because for that reason, we start our starting pay 3% higher, yet everybody gets a raise. So that was the strategy we employed there, and that was equal to 2 steps on their pay. We also eliminated the employment requirement of holding a high school diploma so that we could expand our job market. And we added a South County job fair to get even more exposure in the summer. So those are the things that we did last year. So this summer when I came in, I started having meetings with Mr. Lash, who's the Director of Transportation, and in concert with our principals, had conversations about the things that we could do to now turn to the demand side. I mean, if supply is not closing the gap, we've got to start having less demand on our services so we can concentrate on our core mission, which is getting kids to and from school on time. So we put in a few things, and I'll highlight a few of them. First one was with activity buses, that transportation would make every effort to assign buses from the same zone so they could avoid delays. So we're not having a bus from Grafton doing an activity up in Bruton unless it was going from Grafton to Bruton. With athletics, attempting to utilize athletic buses as substitutes. So let's say a bus from TAB was taking a high school team to York. They could stick around in York, do a couple of the 2nd or 3rd tier runs, and help out there. Also with athletics, pairing buses where able for out of town and overnight destinations so that we could reduce the load on the fleet. With athletics, streamlining athletic travel. We had one example where a middle school baseball team was using 2 buses, that's 2 buses out of the afternoon runs, and so that we get them down to 1 bus so they have the appropriate travel needs. Another thing for field trips is we created a strict 9 a.m. to 1:30 window. So buses, if you're taking a field trip and you're going somewhere close by, you have to leave after 9 and be back by 1:30. Unless if you want to stay later, we can drop you, come back, do the afternoon runs, and then go back and get you at the destination. So that's something we put in. We also put a closer geographical border limit on field trips for Monday through Friday, which extends to just on the other side of Richmond, north of 290, just north of 295, where it merges with 95. And this does not apply to athletic events and playoffs, which we know we're in the playoff time now. And this was, it doesn't affect the weekends. Now, if anybody wants to do a field trip and get a charter bus, then that's fine. Okay, so that's like 7 or 8 of the 10 things that we put in place in this summer. So then the fall came, we start, and we're seeing shortages as we've seen in the past, and we brought a group together to brainstorm transportation fixes, things that we could possibly do. And we brainstormed 46 ideas, and we are now working through those. We have to remember that the transportation staff, it's hard to change the tire on the bicycle while you're riding it, because just the act of running a transportation department is demanding. So we have worked on things like we didn't have an automated, part of what we were looking for is also better communication. So this week we should complete an automated transportation call service. We did not currently have or in the past have something where dial 2 for routing, dial 3 for dispatch, that type of thing. So we're finishing that work this week. We have talked to the athletic directors about what can we do? Can we move the times of games up or back? And if we move them up, that affected instructional time too much. If we moved them back, that would inconvenience parents, or having middle school kids get home too late, which that affects instruction as well. In the end, we made a good effort, but we didn't feel like there was any sweet spot there to get athletic transportation after 4:30 in order to not affect the afternoon runs. We have combined a couple runs in the York Middle zone. We've also we started a dedicated line for schools and principals, so that kind of like the bat phone for when there's an emergency. One of the things is that staff is very busy in the afternoons. Sometimes a number of them are out filling buses. Up to 5 of our staff from the transportation office go out and drive buses on a regular basis. And so then that means we don't have as many people to field phone calls. So we put in a bat phone for emergencies so that they know that those can get answered. We also did an advertisement a few weeks ago for current staff to pick up their certification to drive, in case they could pick up, if their employment allows for it, to be on either side of their work hours, or if they can't, one or the other, if they could just do an AM run or just do a PM run. And we had 11 people answer that, and we're now sifting through them to see if we can get them certified. And then the latest thing we've been working on is we've been checking all of the addresses. We did have some incorrect addresses in the system. We got all of those correct, so that now we could do a simulation. Now that we know who all the riders are this year, kind of doing a simulation, shake the Etch-a-Sketch, and let the computer try to redo the routes and see if we can find any efficiencies there. And that's what we're working on right now. And then after we do that, if we can identify any efficiencies, we'll put those into place, and then we will move on to some of the other ideas that we have.
Any questions?
Yeah, I know back before I was on the board, they had discussed a contracted bus service, and I guess it was not cost effective at the time. Is that something that's been revisited, or do you see any need to even revisit that?
We have not looked at that, because when you privatize like that, sometimes you can pick up the guarantees that you're looking for, but usually they come at a big price tag.
Much bigger.
That is something, I don't know if we have anybody like that that could do that. If we deem that as something we needed to look into, we would. But you also have to remember, anytime you privatize, you lose control of your people somewhat too.
Is this how do we compare to surrounding localities? Are they all experiencing the same thing?
We are all having that problem, and it's actually a nationwide problem.
Nationwide, state and nation, okay.
And Mr. Lash could also, if you want to jump in here, Mr. Lash, and make any comments about the nationwide shortage.
It is a nationwide problem. Everybody's suffering from this. I don't know whether y'all travel a lot, but it's interesting because one of the HR technicians this other day said that she'd been up Route 13 and saw signs all up and down 13. They're all over. Even when I was on vacation down in Oklahoma area, they have banner buses everywhere. In Newport News, we have banner buses. If they're not banner buses, there are signs on the marquees at school. So this is a problem we face, and it's severe, and it's getting worse all the time, actually.
I have a quick question, and you may be one of those 47 listed items that you've already come up with. You have no subs. You're using 5 or 6 people, staff, to run buses if someone's out. Have we considered, I guess you call it overhiring, having additional people that are full-time contracted? We could find them something else to do. If there's no bus to drive, the likelihood there probably will be.
Right. Well, we haven't looked at a different position and overhiring that. We can hire as many sub-bus drivers as we want. I think we still have a couple of FTEs that are still open. We do have 2 more in the driver pipeline right now. But our problem isn't the number of buses, it's the number of people to drive them. And so we will, as we can find them, we will hire them.
But like subs, I guess, don't get the benefits as a full-time employee.
Right.
So would it be, are we in a situation where we know that we're gonna need bodies, that we just continue to look for full-time positions, we find the funding to open up more FTE positions, and the perfect world and everybody comes to work that day, you got 6 or 8 people standing around, I'm sure we can find them something to do.
Additional buses on the road.
Additional buses on the
Yeah,
road.
actually, what we would do, if we have all of our routes covered. So as we hire people that are would be contracted in excess, they would be assigned to a area to be a floater. They would be a permanent sub per se, but they'd be permanent employees that could get benefits.
Okay.
And then above that would be substitutes.
Also, you said this, Dr. Carroll, we also changed how we advertise the position. So Dr. Vladdy, if you want to weigh in, and we advertise for strictly AM, strictly PM, and is it called driver in training, or what's the other one?
In training, so previously, you would have to apply to be, to bus driver, you go to the substitute pool. We've removed that limitation, so we put advertise for a full-time, part-time AM, part-time PM, and bus driver in training to give folks a variety of options that they're looking out there. So if they're interested, we want to have the opportunity to interview and bring them on board.
With the pay increases and then having like the 2 non-licensed job fairs, did we see an increase in interest from previous years?
We did get some applicants, and some of them didn't make it through the process. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize how stringent it is. And you have to subject yourself to drug testing. You have to be able to pass the CDL and get through the training that we do. And along the way, we usually have attrition because people just go, well, this is more than I bargained for, and then they don't make it through the process.
Well, thank you, Dr. Carroll, for that presentation. I think it's important for the citizens to know we're doing what we can, and you're doing a tremendous job. It sounds like you're doing a lot.
In fact,
so.
we've got a dedicated group down there, and they're trying as hard as they can.
Yeah, and it sounds like everybody's working together. They're down to even the bus drivers themselves, which is good. I'm glad to hear that. So thank you for that. And we're going to move ahead. So Dr. Shandor.
Yes, now we'll get into our strategic plan status update. So Ms. Christina Head, Associate Director of K-12 Academic Services, is now going to provide a strategic plan update on the gifted gap. I'll turn it over to Ms. Head.
Hey, good evening, Mr. Richardson, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. Thank you for this opportunity to provide a strategic plan update on closing the gap of underrepresented student populations in gifted education. This evening, I'll share an update and planning steps to meet Objective 4 of Goal 1, which states, by FY22, the gap between underrepresented student groups and the general population participating in the gifted program will be reduced by 2.5%. This chart shows gifted enrollment by subgroup in grades 1 through 7 in spring of 2018 as compared to the division's population in the same subgroup. The bottom row is our division demographic population percentage by subgroup. Almost 60% of students were white, 13% black, close to 11% Hispanic, 5% Asian, and almost 25% were economically disadvantaged. As you look at the top row, this is our gifted percentages. If we had no disparity whatsoever, you would expect to see these percentages to be similar or close to the division percentage for each subgroup. As you can see, white and Asian subgroups are overrepresented, while black, Hispanic, and economically disadvantaged students are underrepresented. On the next slide, we're going to look at the data a little differently. This slide shows the percentages of each subgroup enrolled in the gifted program in 2018 and 2019. Enrollment percentages for 2018 are in green, and enrollment percentages for 2019 are in blue. For example, in 2019, 3.1% of the Hispanic population participated in the gifted program. If you draw your attention to the all columns, 6% of all students in grades 1 through 7 were enrolled in the gifted program in 2018 and 2019. We would expect to see all the subgroups close to 6% if there were no disparity. Again, you see our Black, Hispanic, and economically disadvantaged subgroups are underrepresented. Now let's consider our goal objective to reduce the gap of underrepresented participation by 2.5 percentage points by FY22. This chart shows those underrepresented subgroups and their enrollment percentages in FY18 as shared in the previous slide. The growth of 2.5 percentage points to meet this objective gives us our FY22 target enrollment percentage for each subgroup, as indicated in the last column. For example, the 2018 gifted Hispanic enrollment of 2.1% will need to increase to 4.6 by FY22 to meet this objective. So where are we on this progress to meet this objective? We're excited to see that the underrepresented subgroups increased enrollment in FY19. Black students increased a little over 0.5%, and Hispanic and economic disadvantaged subgroups increased almost 1 percentage point. While this rate of growth is positive and well on its way to meet this objective, further action is needed to continue growth in underrepresented student groups by FY22. Last year, the division implemented a gifted screener to all first graders. This nonverbal screening tool is administered in efforts to lead to a larger pool of student referrals to include underrepresented populations. While we did see a slight increase in underrepresented student groups last year, we will examine the data after this year's screening to determine if this is a reoccurring trend. We have created talent development lessons to implement prior to this screener, an effort to expose underrepresented first graders to similar skills and content. We will determine strategies to implement these lessons in our schools with underrepresented populations. In addition, we plan to provide training to teachers on understanding the characteristics of gifted students and ways those characteristics may be demonstrated in low-income or minority populations. As recommended by the recent program evaluation, staff will develop learning activities that will foster critical and creative thinking and give students who might otherwise be overlooked the opportunity to cultivate and demonstrate their potential gifted talents. This year's division staff will examine the current gifted identification process and the program evaluator's recommendations to make necessary changes to address under-identification of specific subgroups. This will include investigating additional assessments and looking into a different scoring criteria for students in Title I schools. These next steps are significant efforts to increase the enrollment of underrepresented students in our gifted program. Thank you for this opportunity to present an update on Strategic Plan Goal 1, Objective 4, and if you have any questions, I'm available at this time.
One quick question. How are we defining economically disadvantaged?
Those students that qualify for reduced lunch or free lunch.
As you look at your student population in grades, I guess say 1 and 2, over 18 and 19, can you see a relationship between those students that were in a pre-K program or Head Start program, and how can we kind of bridge the gap?
Right, so students that are in early programs, they're exposed to more and have more opportunities for learning. So those students usually have a greater chance on tests and assessments for identification.
But we haven't
We don't know the
specifically done any
percentage.
analysis that would say what percentage of our students who have been in preschool
But
programs.
we don't have a percentage in here of this, say, the 3%, how many came from a pre-K or a Head Start program?
No.
Okay. I would
Great
love to see the
question.
connection, though, to that. Thank you.
Just got one quick question, I guess. As we continue to look at the way we deliver gifted programming, could that, I think you kind of touched on a little bit, can that also increase exposure to more students? You know, in each school.
Right. Yes, so
Could that change this whole, trying to get over that next hump, I guess, and could that do it?
right, those talent development lessons or activities could definitely provide at the early ages of kindergarten and first grade some more opportunity to demonstrate their gifted abilities. And then as they take the screener or even referrals to identification, those students would be qualify at because the services are there at the building where their natural instruction occurs.
But we have the ability to handle the capacity. Meaning that if we start identifying more students and wanting to bring in more into gifted programming, we can handle that capacity with.
We're going to get to that in the very last agenda topic, Mr. Medford.
That'll be the direction from the new board to that.
Yeah,
That would be
yeah. When we start talking about capacity, Dr. Carroll and Sarah are going to share a lot of information with you later on in the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Head, for that presentation. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to move to our strategic plan update, Goal 1, Objective 1.5, Advanced Placement Gap.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Now, Ms. Angie Siders, Director of Secondary Instruction, is going to provide an update related to advanced placement gap. Ms. Siders.
Good evening, Mr. Richardson, Dr. Shandor, members of the board. Tonight, I will provide an update on the underrepresented groups participating in advanced placement course enrollment. I will be addressing Goal 1, Objective 5 of the York County School Division Strategic Plan, which states York County underrepresented student groups and the general population participating in advanced placement course enrollment will be reduced by 50%. This means we want to increase the underrepresented groups in AP enrollment, so let me show you how we have increased participation. This graph shows the baseline data for FY18. All YCSD AP enrollment was at a little over 36% indicated in green. The purple bar shows Black at just under 18% and economically disadvantaged just under 13% in the teal. If you visit the VDOE website, you will see a data discrepancy. Due to reporting errors, the state reported 24% for our baseline data. YCSD data is correct. This chart shows AP enrollment growth for Black students from FY18 to FY20. As you can see, AP enrollment for this subgroup has improved by just over 4 percentage points in the last 2 years. Our goal is 27% by FY22. As you can see, we have reduced the gap and are on target to achieve our goal. This chart shows AP enrollment growth for economically disadvantaged students from FY18 to FY20. As you can see, AP enrollment for this subgroup has improved just over 4 percentage points in the last 2 years. Our goal is 24.52% by FY22. As you can see, we have reduced the gap and we are on point to make our goal. All schools have AP recruitment goals as a part of their school improvement initiative. School counselors will continue to review PSAT data and identify AP potential students that have not signed up for AP courses. School counselors will meet with those students and families to enroll them in AP course and will provide support. AP informational sessions were offered in the evenings for parents and students to attend. This year, schools plan on reaching out and having sessions in the community. As we look at the program of studies, we are adding a new AP course, an AP Computer Science Principles course. This is a foundational computer science course. We have teachers trained and ready for the FY 2021 school year. The National Math and Science Initiative I will discuss on the next slide in detail. We are proud of Grafton High and York High for their hard work they have done with the grant. This grant supports increasing AP enrollment by advancing STEM education and ensuring access for all students, especially those furthest from opportunity. STEM education is the greatest lever to accessing opportunity and is unmatched in unlocking student potential. I am proud to share Many of our AP STEM teachers were NMSI trained in Atlanta and Houston this summer. The NMSI Grant also assists us with increasing the number of students enrolled in AP STEM courses every year. AP demographics mirror overall school demographics, adding new AP courses each year to expand our program. Develop a 3-year strategic action plan that focuses on increasing student access and developing a pipeline of AP students and teachers. Engages with parents, families, and community members to grow and enhance the program. Let me share our next steps. A video campaign can reinforce positive messages and pass along advice from other first-generation students and district alumni, increasing underrepresented students' sense of belonging in higher education. Tabb High School and Bruton High School are looking at applying for the NMSI Grant. Having AP kickoffs in schools to get students excited about signing up for AP classes. Develop with school counselors a data-driven rubric to expand advanced course access. This will ensure YCSD's commitment to increase our underrepresented groups. Thank you for allowing me to share the work we are doing to increase enrollment for our underrepresented groups. At this time, I would like to open the presentation for any questions or comments.
If I may, what is there, or do you see a relationship between the presentation on gifted education and this? So if we work with our 1 through 7 graders, do we get them, increase them, do we get them ready for advanced placement? Is
Yes.
there a connection, or are we seeing a flow between those two?
I haven't personally looked at that data, but I do believe that we do need to look at that because we do have to advance them when they're in the middle school as well and look at those advanced classes. And we also need to look in the middle school and have the guidance look at kids for potential as well. And then that will in turn help when they get to high school for the AP enrollment.
Our schools report out at the end of every school year. Our elementaries do for how many kids are recommended for advanced English and math courses, correct, as part of their SIP?
They did it previously in the last strategic plan. That was an objective. But many of our schools have continued to do that, even though it's not in the strategic plan itself.
Thank you.
Sure. So every year we talk about the, economically disadvantaged, and I try to connect the dots as to what exactly, why is that impacting these kids like this? And I just, on a very basic level, what do we think is happening? I mean, is it after school help? Is it Lord forbid, lack of supplies, money for supplies? What do you think is driving that? I mean, what can we do? These are just economically disadvantaged I'm focusing on right now.
I think we need to focus more, like we're looking at, like the video I talked about creating. Why is it important to go to college? How to go to college? Maybe go over the FAFSA forms, getting them excited about the AP classes. We're doing kickoffs. So for example, they had a group of kids at York High and Grafton High come out. They had Chick-fil-A. It was during the school day and explain the AP courses and AP enrollment. I think it's more of us getting out and explaining to the kids because maybe their parents, I don't know if they don't have time.
So to add to that piece, if your parents did not, we often, our parents are an extremely valuable partner for us in the school division. And if as a parent you did not go to college or you did not, that wasn't the path, it's really opening their eyes to the path. Just like on the other end when we're talking about our college and career readiness piece and expanding people's horizons, because college isn't the only pathway. There are a lot of pathways to success and making sure that students understand that. So in many cases, it might just be not knowing what opportunities exist in that.
Exposure and opportunity.
Yeah.
And the correlation, I guess, between the lower income and college degrees, I guess, exists there. And I guess where I'm going a little bit with this is, so what about the cost of college? Are parents saying, you don't even think about it. We can't send you to college. And is there an area there where we can educate these these families more in that realm?
Well, we just started our early college program this year with Thomas Nelson Community College, and we've got about 40 students in that program. And through the early college program, they are able to take courses, and the school division pays for half the cost of each credit hour. If they're economically disadvantaged students, there's a higher percentage that the division's paying. Those students are currently taking their high school English, which is also the college level English 111 and 112 right now, and government. And some are picking up an additional class, and they'll finish that by December. And then second semester, they'll be fully on the Thomas Nelson Community College campus. And they'll be taking between 12 and 15 hours.
And back to answer your other question too about the staying back after school, NMSI, with the NMSI Grant, they're providing study sessions on Saturdays for kids that they can come, and they also have modules online. So if they're struggling in a class, they can do these modules, and there's a tutor online as well at their leisure. So they can go on and look at the tutorials. So if they go to school and they work or they play a sport, then they can still go home or on the weekends and look at the modules too as well.
And you mentioned also that y'all are going over, even in the video presentations, how to fill out the FAFSA form, so they'll have some way to pay for college, that there's other ways to pay for it, so that's okay.
And scholarships.
Scholarships as well, yes.
But I think when you start thinking about high school, it's too late. In
Yes.
middle school, it's
Yes.
too late. So that's why the recognition of, if there's a relationship between a gifted program and doing better in AP classes, then the difference that we have in that 1 through 7 grade period, we've got to do something there to get them ready. You know, we've made great strides, but we've got a long ways to go without losing the momentum that we already have. So,
I just want to ask, would add, I guess, because Stephanie, you mentioned that reference to the other pathways to success, because we spend, I mean, it's been 20 years, on this board of always talking about how do we, increase our AP courses and get students ready for that, college track and prepare. But we live in a different time now to where there's a lot of industry need out there. So when we step back and say, yes, we're looking at gaps and we're looking at AP and we're looking at what we can offer, we've opened up an avenue where students can start getting some college credits. We have a partnership with regional programs like New Horizons. But have we stepped up things and really ratcheted up here are the other paths. Here are some other programming out there. Do we look at our electives and things that we do internally that we can prepare, like the medical track at Bruton High that we'd love to see expanded out to other high schools in our division. But
So I think we're doing that presentation next month in December.
Now I'm gonna jump ahead again.
No, that's okay. Because it is really important, and that whole pathways to success piece, and the one of the objectives in the strategic plan that's a big audacious goal is the internships and mentorship opportunity for all students prior to graduation. Recognizing that if we don't know what opportunities are out there, or we, that we think about the careers our moms and dads were in oftentimes, or the people in our neighborhood. And so opening people's eyes, we're going to be sharing about the trade wins video through the county and the Chamber of Commerce that have been created that we're going to be sharing with 10th graders. We started the career fairs at all of our high schools last year, but we've had conversations with our business partners about the importance of having the same conversations with parents, so that parents understand that there are some industries their children can go into as soon as they get out of high school, that they can make $40,000, and that's without college debt. And again, we're not saying that's the pathway. We're saying that there are a lot of different pathways to success, and making sure that students understand that. And then the courses that we're adding to the program of studies, which will come to you next month as well, that are really about, again, helping people find their passion and helping people understand that there are a lot of different options available to them. I think the shipyard has reached out, a person at the shipyard has reached out to Ms. Skinner about wanting to create another affiliation with the school division, simply because they need skilled workers and they don't have enough.
Well,
And
I know
so,
years ago when the comprehensive high school concept was just removed, And not all divisions did that, but we chose to do a regional program. So you just think about, decisions that were made and has that created the lack of the interest of, I don't want to leave the school and go to New Horizons because I won't be at my high school the entire day. So they choose not to do that, and then they wish they did. So it's good to hear that y'all are, and the program of study piece is really being.
Mark, New Horizons is rolling out some incredible stuff now. So they are really on top of that. I'm curious, is there any way to find out what percentage of economically disadvantaged kids might be attending New Horizons?
I can
That
get
would
that
be
information.
interesting to know.
We can do that. We'll send it in Friday notes.
That's great, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Siders, for that presentation. Appreciate that. So we're moving on to our next presentation, our Goal 4 Objective Behavior Referrals. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. I'm going to ask Dr. Butler to come on up to the table, and he is going to give a strategic plan update on Goal 4, Objective 4-4 Behavior Referrals. Dr. Butler.
Mr. Richardson, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor, thank you for this opportunity to present an update on Strategic Plan Goal 4, which is school culture, specifically student behavior. Objective 4 focuses on the implementation of programs and protocols to reduce discipline referrals and out-of-school suspensions with a specific lens on exclusionary practices and disproportionality. Under federal law, public schools are required to report the number of students suspended or expelled from school for possessing firearms on school property on an annual basis. School divisions are also required to report the number of classroom removals or out-of-school suspensions issued to students with disabilities. To facilitate this process, the Virginia Department of Education developed the Discipline, Crime, and Violence Report to provide a framework to collect data concerning student discipline. School divisions are required to report any disciplinary incident that results in half to a full day of in-school suspension and all out-of-school suspensions and exclusions. Reviewing the division's discipline data for the year 2018-19, 13% of York County School Division students received a discipline infraction that had to be reported to the Virginia Department of Education. Only 3% of students engaged in behavior that resulted in at least one day of out-of-school suspension. In the following slides, I will examine at a deeper level the division's out-of-school suspension data. As displayed in the chart, the school division reported 1,198 DCV violations for the 2018-19 school year. This number is very similar to the previous school year, and as I stated previously, only 3% of students received an out-of-school suspension for violations of the student handbook, resulting in 830 individual incidents where a suspension was used as the disciplinary intervention. In this slide, the number of elementary, middle, and high school highlight suspension data at each level. There was a significant reduction between school year FY17 and FY18, and we see that we are sustaining that reduction in FY19. When we look at the chart for ethnicity, you will see that for the FY18 school year, Black students made up 13% of the population, but made up 24% of students that received a suspension. And then we see for FY19, Black students still made up 13%, but there was a 3% decline, making up 21% of students with disabilities. While we still have some growth to make, that's a significant change as we move forward in those numbers. Looking at the data for the first quarter for FY20, we see that there is no disproportionality with suspension rates compared to ethnicity. While this is only first quarter data, we believe the various professional development opportunities, the protocols, and school-based interventions have helped create this change. This evening, I would like to share some of the programs and protocols being implemented to support positive school climate and student behavior. The school division is in year 2 of implementing a tiered system of support. And as I shared last year, this is a framework that integrates academics, social emotional learning, and behavior to support all students in the classroom. As part of this process, the school-wide information system called SWIS allows school-based teams to analyze their discipline data to look for frequency of certain behaviors, any type of demographic trends, and even look at the time and location of disciplinary infractions. Currently, all of our YCSD schools have a SWIS license, and they have trained staff to utilize the program with fidelity. Part of the school-wide implementation system is the Positive Behavior Intervention System known as PBIS. And it is a framework that allows for school-wide behavior expectations, common language, and then you reinforce this with incentives and acknowledgement systems. In this graphic here, you can see Grafton High School, and their system is using Setting Ourselves for Success. And they highlight different parts of that with students and with staff, looking at safety, attitude, integrity, and leadership. As part of the VTSS cohort training, all of our school-based leaders receive training. And so last year in October, in January, and in April, you can see in the picture here, team members were brought to the school board office to receive specific training on certain tools, structures, and systems to help them with their school-based teams. They also analyze data and engage in problem-solving activities. As part of the Virginia Tier System of Support cohort, all staff are available for training that are provided at the state level. And during the past school year, the state was able to provide this training in classroom systems, trauma-informed care, and a variety of other sessions to help our staff support our students in the classroom. In August, our school counselors, along with our school psychologists, social workers, and several of our building administrators, received training on restorative practices. These included everything from small group circles that talked about behaviors to formal counseling structures to help facilitate conversation whenever there's a conflict in the building with either students or even with staff and students or even families and students. Through Title IV grant funding associated with the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, every secondary school has been assigned 1 to 2 stipends for a student connection coach. The coaches work to ensure that all students have a social and emotional connection to the school by specifically targeting students with academic, social, behavior, or attendance struggles and providing interventions and support. These interventions span from mentoring, progress monitoring, and college career exploration. The student connection coaches are using the Check and Connect program developed at the University of Minnesota to keep data and track interventions in a systematic manner. Every year, each building designates a bullying prevention coordinator who designs school-based programs and activities to promote a positive school environment with a focus on respect, kindness, and cooperation to discourage bullying behaviors. We see in the pictures here, down at the bottom on Unity Day, which was held in October, the staff at Grafton Middle School supported Unity Day, which is a day that we take to talk about respect for all people, as well as tolerance for students across the school, and we did this in every school in our school division. At the top, you see an example of our elementary school counselors using 2 of the books that they go in for classroom discussions with students to talk about respect and understanding individual differences with students. Thank you for this opportunity to present updates to Goal 4, Objective 4. I am now available for questions at this time.
Have any questions?
If I may, Dr. Butler, I guess last school year when you introduced SWIS to us and the type of information that we would be receiving, and I know that graph that dashboard is real busy. Just kind of in a nutshell, are you able to identify the type of data that you have received, what that data is telling you? What have we received, I guess, that we can use?
So that data is used for the school-based team. So we always have our dashboard where we can look at division data, looking from DCV, from the state report. But then at the individual school level, they're able to pull data such as, if there are certain trends for certain ethnic groups in a certain building, and then what are the behaviors that are being displayed, and then what are the times of day or those incidents. And so they're able to look at that. And if it's a staffing issue, let's say that a majority of issues are happening in the hallway in between first and second period, then that data would make you say, okay, well, we might need to look at supervision at that particular time of the day. And so our school teams have been using that to make those changes and look at different things. I know when Dr. Hartley is getting ready to talk a little later about safe and secure schools, he's going to mention that as well, but they use that as part of their decision-making processes in the building.
And I guess it's safe to say there's nothing that just kind of jumps out at you that we should have a concern or be of a concern in any one particular school.
The way that we look at the data is, so even though we can look at it from the division level, because there's unique populations at each school and there's certain dynamics, we look at every case individually. So if there were concerns with certain things at certain schools, we looked at their data with their team and we try to provide some suggestions for interventions. And that's the reason why the state was providing certain training. So certain schools, it might have been, you had a lot of students that had some mental wellness issues, and so they had to look at more of the trauma-informed care. Some of our schools that had more issues with like classroom systems or different things that go on in the classroom, those staffs try to look at that and say, okay, do we need to tighten up our matrix where we talk about what's the expectation in each classroom and then what's our school-wide expectations, and so they focus more on setting the standard for the whole building and also in the classroom.
And my last question, and I'm done. I'll get you off. When we receive, say a parent notifies us of a concern with a child in a school, and we share that with you all for follow-up, because surely we can't follow up. How does that impact your data? How does out-of-school information relate to that, if it does?
So when we get a complaint or a concern from a parent, quite naturally we work with the school administration team to look into that particular situation and to find out what the example is. So what SWIS helps us do, if there is a trend, so you're starting to see patterns of certain behaviors, so let's just use it for example. If their behavior is using inappropriate language, if that's starting to be a trend and students are reporting to their parents, in the hallway, there's a whole lot of inappropriate language and different things going on, then the school, in addition to addressing that specific need with that parent, they can also look at their SWIS data and their school data and try to do something to address it. For example, last year at York High School, that was one of the things that they had discovered. So they did a Clean Up Your Mouth campaign. They did it at the school with Dr. Butler. And they did that to try to give positive reinforcement for students who were using appropriate language, and then they also had to address the issue with students who were using some inappropriate language.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Butler, for that presentation. Appreciate that. So now we're going to move into our safety security report, goal objective 5.56.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Richardson. I'm going to ask Dr. Doug Hartley if he'll come forward, Associate Director of School Admin and Compliance. He's going to give us a strategic plan update on safety and security. Let's give them a minute to.
I can get it for you. It's yours.
All right, Dr. Hartley.
Good evening, Mr. Richardson, members of the school board, and Dr. Shandor. Thank you for this opportunity to present information about Goal 5 of the strategic plan regarding safety and security. An extremely important objective of Goal 5 is the implementation of procedures that support safe and secure educational environments. Our belief is that early planning and preparation is essential to staying safe. In this picture, principals work through emergency-related scenarios, providing one another valuable feedback. Safety begins with making connections, and connections start with good communication, talking to students, asking questions, and listening. Supporting extracurricular activities and interests enhances student relationships and provides opportunities to interact with families. And connecting eliminates barriers for student reporting, because we always want students to follow the maxim, see something, say something. The school safety audit is required by the Code of Virginia. The components of the school safety audit are school and division safety surveys, which assess safety conditions. Crisis management plans are updated to address emerging areas of concern. And secondary school climate survey measures student and staff perceptions about climate factors. Finally, the school and safety inspection checklist assesses interior and exterior building conditions. It is required every 3 years. However, York County conducts this inspection every year. This slide notes practices and procedures that the division has used for a long time. Some that I would like to share with you are providing student supervision during transition times and in large settings, such as the cafeteria. Also, the 800 megahertz radio provides instant communication to the school board office, York-Poquoson Sheriff's Office, and the fire and life safety in emergency situations. The school division collaborates with the York-Poquoson Sheriff's Office and the Fire, Life, and Safety Department for a team effort to support safety and security. An example of the professional development is noted in this picture, which is from the cover of the Virginia School Safety Training Forum, and it provides training on the latest information and trends concerning school safety. The division sends a multidisciplinary group of staff to this training each year. Additionally, Safe Schools provides mandatory online safety modules to further enhance student and staff well-being. We utilize a variety of methods for sharing information with families and for receiving information about concerns for student and school safety. As maintenance and capital projects are performed, we continue to add security vestibules to our schools. Board members, as you may know, this adds an additional layer of security for our schools. The Code of Virginia requires every school to assess threats using a multidisciplinary team to assess the threat and to determine a proper course of action. As you can see, there has been a focus on vaping efforts to help address current related concerns. Additionally, the implementation of student advisory councils gives voice to students and to share important information with principals. As I noted at the beginning of the presentation, early planning and preparation are essential to keeping our schools safe. YCSD continues to review practices and procedures for continuous improvement to provide safe and secure learning environments. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this information, and I am now available for questions.
I do have one question. The See Something, Say Something, I know we started an initiative, and it was before you took over this position, of course. But it was about 3 years ago when I came on the board. Are we still promoting that and putting that out, that information out?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. 'Cause I know they were like little posters they were putting in the schools and that sort of thing.
That is correct, and we're trying to, with the student advisory councils, trying to spread that word because we know word from peer to peer is highly effective.
Absolutely. Perfect, thank you. All right, thank you, Dr. Hartley, for that presentation. Appreciate that. And next, we're going to move on to the 6-year facility master plan, Dr. Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. So this is our final presentation for the evening. And, okay, I thought our screen went black for a second. So Dr. Carroll, Chief Operations Officer, and Mark Shearhart, Associate Director of Capital Plans and Projects, are now going to present our 6-year draft facility master plan. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Carroll.
All right, thank you, Dr. Shandor. Okay, so this evening, Mr. Shearhart and I are pleased to share information with you regarding the 6-year Facility Master's Plan, also known as the FMP. FMP provides background and historical information about our facilities, presents enrollment and school capacity data, addresses facility needs, and recommends projects for the Capital Improvement Program, also known as the CIP. Beginning last year, the CIP was monitored on a weekly basis by a committee comprised of representation from finance, operations, legal, and the County of York Purchasing Office. Furthermore, Mr. Shearhart and myself are members of the county's CIP committee, and we briefed them late last week on our recommendations being presented to you tonight. There are a number of residential developments that will impact enrollment throughout the division in future years. And a reminder here for the board, residential developments are classified by the County Planning Department in 3 categories. The first one is active, and those are developments with construction underway, and we may have students already attending our schools living in those developments. Second category is pending, and pending are developments for which site plans have been submitted to the county. And then the last is planned. Now, these are developments that the county is aware of, but they haven't had any site plans submitted. In the following slides, I'll share information and projections only from the major developments in the active and pending status categories, with the active projects listed in green. A complete list is attached in the public content on board docs, and also are some tables in the FMP. Before I start with elementary projections, I will use the term full build-out. Now, that refers to all the units that have been completed and given certificates of occupancy. And also note that all projections will not hit all at one time, or even at a steady rate. There's a lot of variability in both these projections and in the timing. Also, as we go through these projections, you'll recognize some of these developments from previous years. Also, you might note that some of them have rolled off as those developments have completed construction, and more of the previously planned developments have now gone active. Now let's review projections for elementary. With these 4 schools here, we see the greatest potential impact on enrollment would be at Magruder Elementary School, with a potential of 156 more students possibly on the way. And continuing with elementary, significant potential for growth is seen in the Waller Mill attendance zone, with a potential of 136 more new students projected for enrollment, followed by 55 students at Yorktown Elementary School. Now we turn to middle school impact. At this level, the greatest potential will continue to be in the Queens Lake attendance zone, with 160 new students projected for enrollment there. And 18 more students at Tabb Middle and 53 at Yorktown Middle, projected for enrollment at full build-out. At the high school level, the greatest potential is at Bruton High, with 219 students projected for enrollment, with 9 more students expected at Grafton. And then the next largest potential impact at the high school level is in the York High Zone, with 75 more students projected for enrollment at full build-out. Remember that these are only the largest projects. You'll find a complete list of projects without student projections in board docs. So now we'll turn to capacities. At the high school level, the instructional capacity is the same as the building capacity, because the utilization of classrooms is different than how we use them in elementary. Next year, we're going to phase out the old capacities from this presentation, so they're being presented tonight in gray. None of the high schools have enrollment greater than the building or instructional capacity, and the level-wide instructional capacity gap is about 900 students. So we're in good shape there. And at the middle school level, the instructional capacity is computed the same as the building capacity for the same reason as in high school. None of the middle schools have enrollment that is greater than the building or instructional capacity, and as a level are about 1,000 students below instructional capacity. So we're in good shape there also. Each year, the instructional capacity is calculated for each elementary school. Here you see an example from this year's Bethel Manor example, which was the closest to our division average. The instructional capacity at the elementary level differs from the building capacity because of the number of classrooms used for pull-out programs. First, we start with the number of regular classrooms in the brick and mortar building. Portables are not included in this calculation. We then deduct the classrooms not available for regular education and instruction. These include the resource classes of art, music, and computer labs. Then deductions for pre-kindergarten and magnet programs if they apply. And then pull-out programs consist of special education, reading, and EL services. In this example, Bethel Manor starts with 34 classrooms. 7 classes are deducted for special programming, leaving a balance of 27 classrooms. You multiply that 27 classroom count by our average class load target of 22.5. Now that comes from, K2, we shoot for 20 students, 3 through 5, 25. So in this calculation, we use 22.5 as an average. With the current enrollment at Bethel Manor of 609, this school is 1 seat over our instructional capacity on paper. But this doesn't present really an accurate picture in that while it looks like a perfect fit, it's not. We have 4 portables at Bethel Manor, and or 4 portable classrooms. And when a school is at 100% capacity, it ceases to have flexibility to adapt to any future enrollment needs. At this point, I'd invite Dr. Guy to comment further.
Thank you, Dr. Carroll. I want to share also that this instructional capacity formula actually looks at students in perfect packages of 20 students per class or 25 students per class. And we all know that students don't come in those perfect packages. And so that's why we try to avoid 100% capacity, because if you're at 100%, you're going to have one grade level that comes in where you're going to have an additional class because of the numbers. And if that happens in multiple grade levels, just like it did at Bethel Manor and several other schools, then that's going to create problems for you. Dr. James and I created this formula many years ago when Yorktown Elementary School was experiencing some significant pressure. The formula previously didn't look at when art and music had been moved out of a classroom onto a stage, and we said we can't say a building is doing fine when you've already pushed those classrooms out. However, what we have recognized is we do need to revisit this formula, and the reason we need to revisit it is twofold. Number one, we have some elementary schools that are at 700 students, and we have other elementary schools that are at 450, and yet we're using the same calculation with regard to art, computer labs, and music. And so we've really got to start revisiting, should our largest schools, the state says we have to have 1 art, 1 music, 1 librarian per elementary school. But we've got to recognize we've got different demands on those larger elementary schools than we have on the smaller ones. So adding additional resource teachers, adding additional computer labs, because if you've got a school of 700, you need more than 1 computer lab. Additionally, in your strategic plan, you have an objective in there that says you want to increase the number of clubs in high demand fields such as robotics, engineering, et cetera, at the elementary and middle school level. And we also received a Department of Defense education grant for STEM activities of $1 million for starting this year over a 5-year period. So $1 million for the full 5 years to buy resources for our schools. And so right now we have some schools that can create a makerspace room because they have capacity in their buildings. And we have other schools that are being pushed, that space is being pushed into a library or on a cart because they have no capacity. So we need to update this formula, because if it's important that we're exposing our students to those high interest, high demand fields, we've got to have the space in our building. And so Dr. Carroll and Ms. Skinner will probably be working toward that new formula for instructional capacity. And so you'll see that we'll have even more pressure on our schools than we already do.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Guy. So this slide is part of a slide you've seen before. It gives you the history for calculating our building capacities and our updated instructional capacity enrollment numbers. Also this year, we split the numbers up to highlight the differences in our capacities between the upper and lower county. Now in this slide, we're including Yorktown Elementary as upper county, because if we were to build an elementary in the upper county, it would have an effect on the Yorktown capacity. So here you see that the upper county in total sits below 90% due to the capacity still available at Waller Mill. The lower county, though, paints an entirely different picture. Here you see that all the lower county elementaries, except for Dare, are above 90%, 95%, with a total just above 99%. And we exist in a dynamic situation. Here we present one projection of 3 I've modeled in the new FMP. This is the model we've historically used and assumes a static instructional capacity, which is unrealistic and impossible to project, and as Dr. Guy just said, perhaps needs to be changed. You'll see that this projection predicts another 877 students over the next 6 years. That's the difference between the two numbers in boxes there. The other two projections that you'll find in the FMP range from 714 students in additional to what we have now to up to 1,124. However, these are based on straight line projections from this year's enrollment. The division does see variation occasionally, especially in times of any recession, economic recession, and we're always subject to any military base reductions in force. So there could be things that would pull these projections down. They're just not being able to be foreseen here in these projections. In addition to our brick and mortar facilities, we employ strategies for dealing with enrollment beyond the school capacity to deal with temporary fluxes in enrollment or as stopgaps until permanent strategies are employed. And these strategies are by agreement between this board and the Board of Supervisors, and it's cited on page 14 of the FMP, and they include the following: utilizing temporary classroom spaces, adjusting attendance zones as feasible, building additional classrooms, and constructing new schools. So the division finds itself in a new position from past years. While we still have the greater amount of real estate development in the upper county, we have lower student enrollment counts at Waller Mill that help absorb most of that growth, and the upper county has historically been slower in producing higher student enrollment. On the other hand, we have 8 schools in the lower county enrolled above 95% instructional capacity, 6 of those above 100. Therefore, we have a capacity issue at the elementary in the lower county. We find it necessary to prioritize projects in this CIP that address adding capacity where we have the ability to do so, and then rezoning will have to be addressed as we complete these projects. One other project that we are exploring is a centralized preschool program for the lower county. We have 10 preschool classes using space fairly evenly across the lower part of the division, including, and in this I'm including Yorktown. Finding or creating space for this program could increase instructional capacity for 225 students across the lower county and do so in an even fashion across the zones. Therefore, staff recommends the following major recommendations in the CIP to be highlighted by Mr. Shearhart later in this presentation. And the first one is to commence exploration and building for the building or acquisition of an existing property for a centralized preschool. Second, commence an expanded 12 classroom addition to Seaford Elementary as soon as possible. And third, after those two, commence the addition to Dare Elementary. Before Mr. Shearhart presents information about the capital projects to be included in the facilities master plan and the CIP, I'm available for questions.
Just a quick question on preschool program. We talking about preschool programs that we control, or are we talking like the Head Start programming that the county?
Yes, these would be our current, what we're listing here is the 10 classrooms we currently have. And I think instruction would say that there are some students that we're not reaching, but we would have to look at what kind of capacity we could either build or get through a building acquisition.
It would be our early childhood special education, preschool programs, and our VPI, which is the Virginia Preschool Initiative for at-risk students.
Does Head Start still use some of our building spaces?
They use, I think, trailers on different school campuses.
Dr. Guy mentioned the method of recalculation after it's something you and Dr. James had completed. How does a new means of compiling this information has not been done, and if it's how would that impact that information?
Well, I think that part of it we would need to have expanded classroom space in order to do so, because let's say maker spaces as an example, and that's something that I know has broad support here, also on the Board of Supervisors. And so right now there is no space for it. But if you were to want to dedicate that to every school, at least one classroom, then we'd want to include that in the calculation. But right now, we don't have room for that.
There's a few schools that have space. It may be limited space, but a few of them have space. And the majority of the schools have the materials, and they're in a cart, so they can use them in various places throughout the school.
And so if you were putting it in raw numbers in the formula, a classroom equates to 22.5. And so if you said we were going to dedicate a classroom space for a maker space, then that, even if they didn't have the space in their building, it would show less capacity for them, because you would lose that classroom space for 22.5 in theory, but they would remain on a cart or in the library somewhere else if you didn't actually have the room, just like we move art and music onto a cart or onto the stage when a school is at or beyond capacity.
So we look into the first item. The second item is going to take a little bit of time, or so we're number 3. But the first item, we didn't have to build if we were able to, find a location. Is that something we're looking to do before next school year, or is it just going to determine on the study and the research?
Yeah, we couldn't make it by next school year, but possibly the one after that. The stopgap's going to have to be portable classrooms, and so you'll see that Mr. Shearhart will present that we're going to be aggressive about placing portables as a stopgap while we get this building going.
Which was really what I wanted to avoid. But it's okay.
Okay. Mr. Shearhart, you ready?
Good evening. I will continue on with this presentation here, the FMP, dealing with the capital improvement projects portion of this. So there are several different things we have to do to maintain our buildings or add capacity to our buildings. First of them is new construction. The second, renovate or add additions to our buildings. Third, to maintain the structures we have already, we need to maintain the HVAC by replacement and energy conservation measures. We also need to replace roofs and repair and or replace the roofs as necessary. And there are some other projects we need to do along the way. So the first section of these projects will be elementary schools. And there, at the top of this one, you see the first project there is Bethel Manor Elementary School. Out in FY26, we see $3.3 million out there. This is for replacing the HVAC in the front half of that school. A few years ago, we renovated the back half of Bethel Manor Elementary School, but the HVAC in the front half has not been replaced. The next project, about the middle of the way down, is Dare Elementary School, and this is, as Dr. Carroll alluded to, is the A&E and the construction of a 6 to 8 classroom expansion there. That would involve some renovation of the existing structure expansion of the cafeteria for additional seating for more students, and we project moving the stage to the gymnasium to give them more room inside the cafeteria. And so you see the funding there, FY 21, 22, and 23. Then the last project on this page is Mount Vernon Elementary School, and again, this is the HVAC replacement at that school. We need, out in FY 26, we need 1.5 million to replace some of the rooftop units there, and they're they're in need of replacement in the near future.
Hey, Mark, if I can interject real
Yes, sir.
quick. Just wanted to point out that the numbers in green there represent cash contributions. The other numbers represent debt service to the county. The cash comes to us in revenue stabilization funds or dedicated end-of-year dollars. Just wanted to point that out.
Great. So on this page here, we have two items, the Seaford Elementary addition. We already mentioned that it was increasing it from a 6 classroom addition, which is what we had at last year's CIP, to a 12 classroom expansion. And this will also involve some renovations to the school for additional capacity in the cafeteria, and also probably moving the stage to the gymnasium for additional capacity there. And so we have that, and you see FY 21 and FY 22 with $500,000 there, as was said, as cash from the Revenue Stabilization Fund. The next project at the bottom there is Waller Mill Elementary School, and this is a new project here. This is adding 6 classroom addition there, and that's out in FY 25-26. That will need some work in the main part of the building, but most of the building was renovated here a few years ago, and so we don't need to do that again like we would at Dare or in Seaford. The next set of projects is in the middle school. And as you see here, the biggest significant change here is Queens Lake Middle School. This project, we're projecting it should move out 1 year, so it moved from FY 22 to 23 and from 23 to 24. But you do see some funding left in 22 there. This is for A&E for that project. The next project will be Grafton Complex, and this is a project that's underway right now, which we started last summer, and we will finish it up this summer in the middle school side, and that's for replacing the HVAC there. There was some cost overruns there because of the footing issues in the front offices and a couple of different other things, and that's why we have some money is being inserted in FY 21 to pay for that. The next set of projects is for the high school. Now, the first one here is not really for Bruton High School, it's for the Bruton Zone, and this is actually for bus parking lot there. We had that in more recent years, but we moved it out to FY 25 and 26. The hope is that we can find another location to park our buses up there without having, up in the Bruton Zone, without having to actually build a parking lot. So that's one of the reasons it's been moved out to FY 25 and 26. The second project I'd like to focus on this page is the second from the last one there for Bruton High School. And this is a new project, and this is for A&E and coating the low slope roof there. That building, again, we want to maintain a watertight roof, and at this point in time, that roof will be about 20 years old, and we need to protect that roof. The next set of projects is at Tabb High School, and this is for replacing the HVAC there, but also some renovations will be done to the building while we're doing those HVAC replacements. Also, the intent is to create a security vestibule at that school at that point in time as well. That project has actually been moved forward 1 year. It used to be in FY 24 and 25. It's now moved from FY 24 to 23 and 25 to 24. But you also see some funding there in FY 21 and 22, and this would be for the A&E for that project. The last project on this sheet here is at York High School, create a bus parking loop and expanded parking lot there. That has been delayed and moved out to FY 26, and the reason for that was that we were waiting for the results of the facility study and more investigation there before we try to build an additional parking and expanding a bus loop there. I'm sorry, I'm going through here quickly, but if you have any questions, you can stop me at any point in time and ask questions about any of the projects.
Mark,
Yes.
you want me to wait till the end, or you want to?
No, you can ask a question now.
Just looking back on where are we, under middle schools, Queens Lake?
Yes, sir.
You probably said it, I just didn't catch it. I mean, FY '22, we're looking at 921, 690,000, then you jump up to 5.6 million from.
Right.
That was the A&E first?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Then the construction.
Right, the A&E is in FY '22.
Okay, I got you. All right, thank you.
The rest of it is for the construction.
All right.
Yes, whenever you see a multi-year project, that first year is going to be the A&E.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And, right, and that is, if Queens Lake stays at middle school, the gymnasium there's too small to do competition in, so they need a larger gym, so we'd have to add a gym to the building as well as classrooms.
Okay, thank you.
Another quick question if I may. The Bruton zone, the bus parking.
Yes, ma'am.
I know we've been looking at possible places, pieces of land for that, and that's near FY '25. Is there any additional long-term concern? And I hear Magruder all the time because where we park the buses at Magruder, even some of Williamsburg, James City, people who live on that end. But like if there's a game there, if there's a program there, there's hard for parents to park. So any.
Yes, so we're working really closely with the county. So I'll let Dr. Carroll answer this, but he's going to include in this the CIP committee that we convened last year, as well as talk about how we've shared this information with the county as well. But you could answer the other question.
Yeah, so we're working with them, and we've moved this money out because things are fluid right now, and there's possibility of a location that will not need this type of investment, but would have everything already there. So it would just be a matter of arriving at a rental cost. So we are in hopes that that's going to work out. Otherwise, we don't have a property yet, and as soon as we identified a property, then let's say in next year's FMP, we might slide that up. If that were the case that it was needed, but we're hoping it won't be. I can't say public.
You can't go public with that yet. Okay.
You had a comment.
Yeah, I was going to say, Dr. Carroll, if you could also just share with the board related to the CIP committee and who's on that committee, as well as how you and Mr. Chair presented this information to the county.
Okay, at the county CIP meeting, they have
and our team.
Okay, and our team is, I think I stated, it's members, Mr. Shearhart from Capital, me from Ops, Greg Dolak from Maintenance. We have representatives from Finance, Mr. Bowen and Mrs. Kirk. We have Doug Mead with Information Technology. And then we have 2 members of the County Purchasing Department are there.
Our attorney.
And then our attorney, Ms. Berry. And that, we had a lot of discussion there. Everybody's at the same table. And what we found is it speeds up conversations. We're not doing things by email. I mean, we still are, but it's not linear. We're able to discuss issues at the table. People from their different perspectives are able to say, hey, I will need X for that, or I'll need Y. And that's quickened the process there. And
the team meets every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday.
So that's really helped us.
A last question, if I may. I'm just being partial right now. And you may have said it before. Tab Middle and Yorktown Middle renovate locker rooms in FY20, but Queens Lake is moved out to FY23.
Because that'll be part of the renovation.
Part of the renovation,
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
We would loop it in.
Okay, into the renovation.
One last question real quick. I was just asking Dr. Shander. I remember, what was it, 3 years ago or 4, we were talking about storing the buses behind Tab High School. I don't know if that was before you. And
I think it was before me, but I know there were power
lines or something like that. So we had the issue then, but I guess now that we've renovated Tab Middle, we're okay for a while there, leaving those buses there.
I think we're fine at Tab Middle. I think the
complaints.
idea was near the fire station, correct, James?
Yes.
Yeah, it was
the fire
behind
station.
Tab.
But
Yeah.
it was cost prohibitive because of the landscape there. I think it was going to be like 30-some thousand per bus spot to park there.
And if I'm not mistaken, they were parking at Tab Middle, but we didn't have the same configuration
We have a bigger parking lot.
in the parking lot, so it's eased up then. Okay.
Right.
Curious, okay.
So speaking of parking lots, I have one additional question. We're talking about some possible renovations at Dare Elementary and Seaford Elementary, and a lot of times we do these additions to the elementary school, but we do nothing to the parking lots until later.
So,
Those are going to be included. Whenever we do, if we're talking about expanding the scope of those schools, not only are we talking the parking lots will be touched. In the Seaford example, it was on the page before you saw that project.
Okay.
it should there as well.
Yeah.
Because
Right there at the bottom, you see that?
Okay.
But also, any of these wings, when we're talking about Seaford and Dare, we'll also be talking about visiting the cafeteria and any other common areas that need to be expanded, much like we did at Yorktown Elementary School
Right.
a couple of years ago. So that's something that we're looking at, because we can't just expand capacity and not take care of our common areas.
So I'm sorry to jump in here. With the elementary school, the additions at Seaford and Dare, but like Coventry and Grafton Bethel are both at like 104 and 108% capacity. Are we looking at rezoning to help alleviate after those additions are done? Or?
Yes, we would have to do that. Where our limitation is just some properties we can't build at. So Dare's one we can, Seaford we can, Waller Mill we can, and Bruton. Those are the only four buildings where we have any capacity, land capacity.
Other than a new school.
Other than
Well,
I think you were on slide 32, I think, or somewhere around that.
Ready?
So this is the second to the last slide here. So we were talking earlier about the portable classrooms. So you see the top line there in FY 21 and 22, last CIP, it was only 200,000, and that was for paying for leases for the trailers that were already existing. The reason these dramatic increases there is for installing additional mobile classrooms or portable classrooms on multiple school sites. We do not have those sites identified yet, but we know that they're coming. We know we're going to have them, so that's why the funding is there. The next one down is a new one. Our 800 megahertz radios that we use, that the school board office uses, the sheriff uses, the fire and life safety use. The ones that the school division owns are aging out. They are about 15 years old, and they were only supposed to last about 10 years. So they're aging out. We need to go ahead and start replacing those, and that's what the funding is for there in FY 23, 24, and 25. The next one down is video services. That's one we do every year. It's a partnership with the county buying new video services equipment. The next one down there is what Dr. Carroll talked about earlier, the preschool spaces. We've inserted $2 million in FY 21 and 22. This is if we can find a building that we can renovate, or if we have to buy build a new building, one of the two, we're going to have some funding there to do one or the other. The location has not been identified yet either. The last one there is the new elementary school, and we did, because of the added capacity we're looking at Dare and at Seaford, and also with this pre-K spaces, we feel like we can move the new elementary school back 1 year. So it's moved back from 23 and 24 to 24, 25. You do see the funding up there in green for the new elementary school. So the A&E, we do have the funding available for the design of that new school without actually building the school yet.
I had a question just on that, because I guess I've never seen A&E spread over 4 years that I can recall, or of anything we've done. Is that because it's being done over and over and over again, or is the A&E going to cost that much? We're just spreading it over 4 years. So,
Look, I can answer that. The money has been set aside for the A&E of this project. That's coming from the Revenue Stabilization Fund. However, we've kind of stopped doing, we haven't really begun in earnest the complete A&E. We've got schematics, and we've paid for the schematics. But as you've noticed over the past couple of years, we keep moving that school out. And so we've never got to that point that we needed to have that full A&E work done. So the money the A&E work has kind of moved as that project has moved out years.
but is it? I just did some quick math, and it's like little over $1.7 million in the A&E for a new school. I guess that's the norm to design a new school. But this whole thing adds up to like a $33 million budget item.
There is some money that's already been allocated for A&E that we've already paid for preliminary plans. We don't have any plans, but we've done some preliminary design work. And typically there's five phases for when you're doing A&E, and so that's why it's broke out that way.
And I'd say one more thing, yes, schools are getting more expensive, and the farther we push that out, that project would get more expensive. So we're dealing with it in the short term with the additional wings.
And I know these are forecasts. We don't know what the economy's going to look like in 24 and 25 and construction costs and stuff. But then I wanted to circle back with, I haven't given you totals yet, but as we look at what y'all are recommending for the leasing of mobile additions to buildings and such, at what point do we just take those dollars and allocate it towards, and this is a question that somebody may ask one of us as a board member, to say, well, why are you spending these dollars now that equal millions in some cases, and just allocate that and go ahead and just do the new elementary school. Now, I know debt service and the county drives when we can borrow and when the funds would become available to build a school, but based on everything we got presented tonight, obviously we're back where we were before, and we can try to temporarily fix it with mobiles and additions to buildings. But at what point do you say, let's just do this thing?
Right. And those are conversations that we've been having. And one of the things, the determination that we arrived at was we still could, with the use of the portable classrooms and adding the wings, that hopefully we can stay ahead of this. Because the other pendulum can swing the other way. That you make a commitment to a full building, you'd have to decide, are you going upper county or lower county? And then once you do that, that options, one or the other, may not be open to you if the other side of the county then explodes. And so we felt like this kept our options open. It utilized the land that we had, and that chances are we'll be able to keep up. Dr. Shandor?
No, I think everything you said is accurate. I think if you go back to the slide that Dr. James has presented for the last 5 years and Dr. Carroll presented tonight of the 4 strategies that we utilize. So talking, and if you want to pull it up just real quick.
Oh, that's it.
So this has been the practice for our board for forever. So I think being responsible stewards of the dollars, and as Dr. Carroll just talked about, utilizing the space that we have is important. And we maximize that space. If we have to adjust our attendance zones, which we did a few years ago, to a few small places that the Crescent, which wasn't even built yet. I'm not even sure how far along that is. Building the additional classrooms. So I think working through that process to get us to where we need to go are important steps for us to take. Again, to Dr. Carroll's point, if you jump to building that school and we lose 400 kids next year, that creates a whole other issue and problem and concern.
A perfect example is if we had 4 years ago started construction in the upper county, we would lose a lot of that ability to do anything in the lower county right now, and that's where we're seeing the population growth now. So you just try to be measured, you make the best decision based on the information you have at hand, and we feel this is the best course.
And I asked that question on purpose, and I'm glad you both answered the way you did, because we will get those questions, just like y'all do. And people need to know that, over the years I've been on this board, and even as long as Barbara has, this is the way we've operated. And even though sometimes it's inconveniencing for a site to have a mobile classroom unit moved in. I remember the year that Bethel Manor had, 30 units out back, and that was half of their school. Just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Right.
So
just a couple other quick points. The challenge for us, and probably every school system in the country, is we're balancing 3 things when it comes to a capital budget. So when you think about this, for us it's capacity, and we're on the other side of that where we're gaining kids where a lot of divisions are losing students. So we're balancing capacity and numbers with students. We're also balancing maintenance, when you think about roof and HVAC, those things that we know we have to do. And then the third thing is innovation. We know that we've got to create spaces in our schools. And you think about the learning commons at York High School and the one that we're going to construct at Bruton. We do have to keep up and make sure our space, we create space for our kids to do things like the STEM activities, the NMSI Grant, all those types of things, and keep up with technology. You know, our libraries, I know we talk about this, those of you in the room that went to Tab High School, you know, your name is probably still on one of the desks at Tab High School, so it's not. But we know we know we have to create space for these kids now in the future involving the technology. So when you think about that, capacity and numbers, maintenance and innovation, we try to balance those three things and be responsible with those resources the best we can.
And I would remind you that it's by agreement with the Board of Supervisors in previous years.
Mark, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but I was looking, when we first started talking about this school, in my mind, $25 million for some reason rings a bell in my mind. Does that sound?
That's about right.
And this was 31 million is kind of what we're looking at?
Yeah, and that was 5 years ago when I got here. Neil Morgan and I were walking through the woods up in the Bruton zone trying to find land. And, you know, again, we didn't jump back then. And, you know,
So and we've seen significant increases in costs and building materials, and that's coming in with every
what's that about?
bid that we get now.
It's about 5 to 7% a year.
5 to 7 a year. So is that what we, moving forward, that's probably what we're looking at, which makes the decision even more difficult, I realize that. But I just think to understand the gravity of how much this stuff is going up is important, you know, as we make these decisions.
If I may.
Wow.
Are you through?
Yeah, sure.
No, two things. I remember when we bought property for the Grafton complex, and we sit on it for a long time because we weren't ready to buy, but you needed a certain piece of property to get all the fields and everything, the school. So we had it when it was time to build. Are we still going to be able to hold on to the marquise? Because we looked at different pieces of property in the Upper County, and that became the best piece. So that's something that we as a division can hold on to for a few years to come.
Yes, we have no limitation on holding that land, and until we say that we would no longer want it, then we would have to give it back to the developer.
Okay.
But there's no time limit on that agreement.
And lastly, even when you look at your A&E for your standalone or your hubs for the 12 pre-K classrooms, that's just to build it or to refurnish it. That's not to staff it.
Right. That does not
So that's
involve
going to be
operating
another
costs.
whole piece because it's a
Preschool's already
separate.
staffed, I think already.
Yeah, preschool's already staffed. I mean,
But this is not an additional piece
It
for
would-
preschool?
It would probably be run as a program. There might be a coordinator and a secretary, that type of thing, a custodian. But that, you hit on a really good point. If you were to build a school, now you're talking about a full administration,
Right.
a full custodial crew, counselors. The teachers will pretty much
You're
follow the
duplicating
students.
everything, yeah.
But there's all this other
resource teachers.
media,
Right.
that's all going
Yeah.
to drive up your operating costs, which then costs you with other things. There's always trade-offs, and that would hurt things like compensation.
All right.
So if we're ready to wrap up, then there's just one more slide, hit the right.
There you go.
And this is the total. So the difference in this CIP from the ones of recent years, if you'll see the FY20 expected is $9 million. When you look at, as you go across on that top line, you'll see there's significant increases. And when we look at the 6 years from FY21 to FY26, we are now asking for 20% more than we have been in recent years. And we do this because we know that there's increased demands on our capacity, and also there are projects that we need to leave on the document, and as Dr. Shandor said, so that we can attack all three of those areas of innovation, maintenance, and capacity. And therefore, that's why we're going to be asking a larger number from the county this year. And they've been briefed on that. And that concludes our presentation, so if there's any other questions.
pretty much covered them all the way through, but thank you. That was a great presentation. Thank you, Dr. Carroll and Mr. Shearhart,
Thank you.
for all that hard work on that. I know it was a lot to put together. Especially your first time doing it.
Who's got the information?
All right, well, I appreciate all the updates provided to the board this evening, and as a reminder, we'll be back on Monday, November 25th at 7 o'clock for our regular school board meeting here at York Hall upstairs. And we're in need of a closed session to discuss personnel matters, so could the board members make a motion in a second to take us into closed session?
Move motion to go into closed session.
Second. And the closed session can be read. Yeah, it's personnel.
Personnel,
All right,
that's
so I
it.
move that the York County School Board convene in closed session to discuss personnel matters pursuant to personnel exemption at section 2.2-3711A1 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act.
Thank you, Dr. George. So we had a motion and a second. Ms. Ford?
Yes, the motion was made by Dr. George and seconded by Mr. Higginbotham for the school board to convene in closed session. Mrs. Haywood?
Yes.
Dr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Mr. Medford?
Yes.
And Mr. Richardson?
Yes. So we're now in closed session. Thank you.